The Medal of Honor franchise has been one of gaming's longest running shooters out there. And yet, despite this, I have only played the last two titles, that being the 2010 reboot and Medal of Honor Warfighter. I missed out on the earlier games, probably due to me being a bit young and not really having a direct interest. And by the time I did have any interest, games like Call of Duty and the Battlefield franchise had already taken off in a big way. Today, however, we're taking a look at Medal of Honor Airborne, and this would be the first Medal of Honor game released for the 360 and PS3, right before they rebooted the franchise to try and capture a different audience. I played Medal of Honor Airborne for the first time just a bit ago, and today I want to break down my feelings on my experience, and I must say, honestly, I was a bit surprised here. There's definitely more than meets the eye, and you can tell the developers really wanted to separate this game from just being another World War II shooter. Airborne is actually quite a forward-looking game. It feels a lot more dynamic than the competition, and around that time that would be games like Call of Duty 3 as well as Battlefield 2142. There's actually been some effort put into the gunplay, and I would still classify this as an arcade shooter really, but you actually feel the weight of your guns here. You get appropriate recoil with all of your shots. The way that the characters move, it feels like you're almost controlling an actual person. They'll stumble, and you can even sprint in this game, which you have to keep in mind. Many shooters, including Call of Duty, wouldn't introduce that until many months later. There are even hit markers here when you shoot an enemy, which again, this wasn't a standardized notification in a single player environment. It was really only applied to multiplayer, and we wouldn't see games kind of, introduce that later on. And you even have a lean feature as well, and you can peek around corners, and you control this on a granular level with the analog stick while holding one of the bumpers. And the game just has a lot of these forward-looking elements that many shooters from its time really lacked. And I think honestly that a lot of these features we take for granted today. I actually really enjoyed the gunplay and the shooting for what it's worth. It doesn't feel quite as responsive as titles like Call of Duty, but you also have to keep in mind that this game is running at 30 frames per second, so you have to sort of contend with that. But overall, this is a well-playing game with a lot of really nice touches to make it stand out from other World War II shooters out there. The flagship gameplay pillar, however, is Airborne's respawn system. Now, in just about any other shooter, once you die, you restart from a checkpoint. And there are checkpoints in this game, but many times you'll actually be respawning from the air. Hence the title of this game. You actually parachute into the battlefield, and you have complete control to decide where you want to land, whether it's near your objective, somewhere far off, and it's just incredibly cool. It also adds a bit of tactics to the gameplay, because there are many levels where you have sort of multiple objectives, and you just have to sort of figure it out. And you have this sort of sandbox environment to sort of explore and play around in. There's Nazis shooting you everywhere. So you actually can choose to land in a more quiet, secure location and kind of work your way up to your objective. Or you can decide to land right in the heart of the enemy and just pray that there's enough cover around so you can be effective in combat. I love this autonomy, and their decision here definitely gives the game its own identity rather than it just being a simple level-by-level based shooter. It's just an honestly real cool and unique system that we just don't see in games today, really only implemented in a multiplayer environment perhaps. But overall, these elements help give Medal of Honor Airborne a bit more character compared to other games. And when you look at the other shooters and the World War II games released around this time or before, Airborne really separates itself as being a title that helped modernize some gameplay mechanics that we just wouldn't see standardized for many years to come. And of course, as I always like to do, let's take a look at the box art for Medal of Honor Airborne on Xbox 360. I like the cover art for this one. You kind of see the soldier kind of overlooking the, the kind of torch skies and stuff like that. It looks really cool. Good look at the spine there. And then on the back, it kind of talks about the different gameplay pillars and elements. It explains that you're part of the Airborne Squadron. It kind of sets up the premise for the game. And you got a couple of in-game screenshots there, so pretty cool. Now, if we open it up here, I got a complete version of the game. We got a nice original game disc here, which is in really good condition. The Series X had no issue reading the disc here and downloading the game, and neither does my 360. And if we take a look at the manual, this is okay. It's perhaps one of the kind of more shorter and sparse manuals that we've seen from this time, but it's black and white, not a lot of pages, and just sort of basic general information in there, so it doesn't really do much. And this is a really cool ad. We have an ad for the Medal of Honor Airborne mobile game, but look at this mobile game. I just love the way that this kind of looked at, this kind of advert. I remember games like that, playing them on some flip phones back in the day, so it's just quite interesting to see how far we've come. So yeah, pretty cool look at the ad there, and the case and stuff for Medal of Honor Airborne. Really enjoyed the game packaging for this one. Now, looking at the visuals for Medal of Honor Airborne, I think anyone would be quite satisfied with the presentation here. This gameplay here is taken from an Xbox Series X, and the console does not enhance the gameplay in any meaningful way. There's no FPS or resolution boost. So this effectively is the standard presentation on Xbox 360, with any performance issues that would have occurred smoothed over, and of course better upscaling thanks to the console's hardware. I think it's quite an attractive game. It doesn't have some of the more advanced lighting techniques from other games released around this time, but it just has good detail throughout. You have a nice full screen and object-based motion blur effect, which just helps mitigate the stutter that you would see in a 30 FPS title like this. There's good smoke and particles, and the ragdolls here are quite good too. So when you blow someone up or kind of shoot them down, they have a somewhat realistic appearance to their death. They did a good job with that. But this is an early Unreal Engine 3 game, and honestly, I've seen worse uses of this engine from titles around this time frame. So I think Airborne looks consistent with what it sets out to do, and it's quite a sight, especially in some scenes. They have some nice set piece destruction, and when you're kind of parachuting in, you get this really nice bird's eye view of the battlefield, and the pop-in isn't that noticeable either. And when it comes to sound and music, this is a bit hit or miss actually. I felt a lot of the music in this one sort of sounded the same. The soundtrack is very orchestral, and it definitely is nice, but it almost felt like I was listening to one entire song like throughout the game, and it just kept like changing the beat or melody to be louder or softer depending on what was happening on screen. It's fine, but it just sort of fades into the background while you're playing it. You're not really going to notice it too much, and I don't think it really, there's not really enough variety there when it comes to the musical selection of what you're listening to. But the actual gun sounds do sound decent enough. You have all the classic World War II weapon noises coupled with the screams and conversations of the soldiers, and there's good bass response as well, especially when you're parachuting in. You just hear like the thump of the explosions below, and it definitely has some presence. The sound is perhaps one of the weaker elements to the game, but it's good enough that it does its job fine. It just doesn't really stand out in any meaningful way. So I was quite happy with Medal of Honor Airborne. I enjoyed it more than some of the later titles in the franchise, and it feels like it's trying to do enough different rather than just being another sort of level-by-level based shooter, and there's always hallways or fields or industrial complexes you're fighting through. I like what they were going for here. It's just a shame that this really marked the end of Medal of Honor kind of tackling World War II, right? Because I guess there's only so much you can do with World War II, but I'm just a bit disappointed that a lot of these cool gameplay elements here never actually made it into their later iterations. The airdropping mechanic is just so cool, and it deserved to be part of the later titles in the series. I also like the nonlinear objective path. They did a really good job with that. And the whole point is, there's enough here to really enjoy and separate itself from the other shooters out there. And it's backwards compatible on Xbox, so if you pick it up, you can play it on those new systems. And the PS3 version wouldn't end up releasing until a few months after the 360 and PS3 version, but it is available on there as well, and of course, as I've just mentioned, PC. For now, though, let me know what you guys think if you played Medal of Honor Airborne back in the day or perhaps recently, and I appreciate you all watching this reminiscing video. I'll catch up with you all later. Thanks, and have a good one.